Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about 10 ways to live with a guitar you hate, Les Paul edition. Some people love them, some people hate them. I find myself on both sides of the coin often. So today we're talking about 10 ways to live with a Les Paul. Now there's a lot of reasons to love a Les Paul, which is maybe why you ended up with one or you're thinking about buying one. Great tone, lots of sustain, interesting history associated with this model, both good and bad. Great classic, good looks with that single cut design and that arch top. Lots of them have flame tops as well. Just really beautiful guitars, and even that slinky 24 3/4 inch scale length, which makes bending a dream. So maybe you snagged yourself a Les Paul thinking about all the great things about the guitar, only to find out that living with it long term, well, there's a lot of downsides as well. So we're gonna look at 10 of my things to help make living with a Les Paul a little easier. Right, now the first thing I would recommend to help you fall back in love with the Les Paul is to go back to the basics and re-engage with the volume and tone control. This is a surprisingly versatile design, and I know lots of people just kind of like run them full out and let her rip, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you are missing out on like a world of tonal possibilities. As I mentioned, this guitar is so versatile. So with a volume and a tone for each pickup, you can, take your volume back if you're using high gain and get some surprisingly, beautiful tones just by rolling your volume back, using your tone control, putting your toggle in the middle and doing some blending. There are a ton of tones. So I would recommend if you, find yourself reaching for a different guitar and you're like, the Les Paul's too heavy, it's too awkward, I just don't feel like playing it. Well, as you're practicing your scales, your chords, your songs, also practice using your tone controls, plug it in, and I think each time you pick up this guitar, if you mess with the controls, you're probably going to walk away with some great tones you wouldn't have found otherwise. All right, number 2. I can't play this guitar for more than 5 minutes and the whole thing is horribly out of tune. Well, before you sell the guitar or start replacing components, there's a few simple things you can do. Now the first thing you can try to keep these beasts in tune is to loosen the string, take a mechanical pencil and draw in a generous amount of graphite in each one of the string slots. It doesn't cost you a thing and it might actually help keep your guitar in tune. So satisfying. Number 3, if you're struggling to play your Les Paul and you just find yourself wanting to sell it or just put it aside and not play it, well, before you do that, take it into a good tech and get it set up. So many of these guitars are not set up correctly and cause all sorts of problems. And so many people, when they get their guitars back from a tech, fall in love all over again, not realizing how well these guitars can play. And of course, a tech can find things like high frets and low frets causing buzzes or sustain issues, setting up the height at the nut, which a lot of guitars are not set up correctly there. You cause all sorts of problems, setting up the height between the tailpiece and the bridge, buffing out those saddles so you don't get string breakages. All those things, a good tech can do for you, and it'll absolutely transform your guitar. All right, number 4 is find the thing that is unique about your instrument, maybe something that, only it does, none of your other guitars quite do it the same way, and that kind of, can help you fall in love with your guitar all over again. In this case, we were using the Les Paul as a kill switch. We have our neck pickup turned off on the volume, and of course the bridge all the way up, so when we flick to the neck, it just cuts out the signal, which is kind of like a fun Les Paul thing to do. Finding things like that about your Les Paul or other guitar that you're kind of not using a bunch can really reignite some passion and creativity when using the guitar. Number 5 to try before ditching your Les Paul, try changing the string gauge. The Les Paul has its own thing going on, and with the 24 3/4 inch scale length and the strings that don't go through the body, you know, they're just kind of top mounted here, it just has its own feel. And if you're used to something else like a Strat or a Tele or an Ibanez or, you know, any of the longer scale length guitars, the gauge you use on those probably won't be the gauge you like on a Les Paul. So, you know, going to 10s, 11s, or 12s might be, you know, much more comfortable to you. It just depends. But, you know, if you play 9s on your Strat, you're probably not going to like 9s on a Les Paul. So just make sure, you know, before you ditch it, before you trade it, before you sell it, try, you know, playing some 10s or 11s on your Les Paul, and you might find that you like it a lot more. So it just depends. Everybody has their own touch. Some people have a super heavy touch. I would recommend thicker strings for you so you don't put them out of tune as you're kind of digging in. And if you have a light feathery touch, you know, you can go to maybe, you know, 10s on your Les Paul, but experimentation is the key. So before you ditch it, try a different string gauge and you might be surprised. Number 6, if your Les Paul is just not jiving with the style of music you play, before moving it on, try adjusting your pickup heights. Now, humbuckers are very forgiving when it comes to string height, and changing them in relation to the strings will absolutely transform the way your guitar sounds. Now, this is the Schecter Apocalypse. It's got pretty hot pickups, so if I were to play, you know, like metal or something like that, I would leave the pickups way up high here. You can see, you know, they're just barely off the string, and they are going to kick out some serious output. Now, I normally play like rock and blues. Now, in that case, I will just take the screwdriver, and as you can see, we're just going to lower the pickup. Super easy to do. You don't need a tech or anything like that. You just simply need a Phillips screwdriver and start lowering that pickup. Now here, you know, you can see it's quite a bit lower than it was, and this is going to be great, and you're going to lose a bunch of output. So, you know, if you want more output for playing metal and heavy rock, just raise that pickup up. If you want something less, you know, for blues, for jazz, that kind of thing, well, just take it down and you will lose a ton of output, which in certain situations is exactly what you want. So before, you know, you spend a bunch of money on, you know, boutique pickups or swapping things out, well, just try adjusting the height. That's going to really change your tone. So there you go. If you want a different sound out of your Les Paul, before you get rid of the guitar, before you know, spend a bunch of money on it, try this first. Right, on to number 7. Well, we all know Les Pauls can be absolute beasts. We're talking 9 to 12 pounds, especially if you have a traditional with no weight relief. They get very heavy very quickly and can be absolute shoulder destroyers. Now, before you trade that Les Paul in for, you know, like a 6.5 pound Strat or Tele or something like that, well, try something simple. Just get a super wide strap. That makes all the difference in the world. Don't go with anything, you know, skinny like this Fender. Get like a bass strap. This is like 4 inches wide, something like that, and it will make your Les Paul much more manageable to play over long periods of time. I would also recommend, if your Les Paul doesn't have super wide strap buttons, put a set of those on, because when Les Pauls slip off a strap, they do so catastrophically and will like destroy the headstock and the neck. Let's be honest, if your guitar doesn't hold tune, well, you're not going to love playing it, and these saddles can be just as bad as the nut slots for holding up the string and causing tuning instability. So what I like to do is just take some light oil and a Q-tip, put some oil on the Q-tip, and then just kind of paint your saddles and the string slots. And if a little gets down onto the screw, well, that's going to help it move back and forth and keep rust away and all that kind of stuff too. So just kind of paint on some light oil for each one of the slots. You can actually pull the strings out to do this as well, but it works just as well because the oil just works its way in. And there you go. Try those 2 things before replacing parts, before doing anything else drastic, and you might find yourself loving playing your guitar. Number 9 may help you fall in love with your Les Paul all over again. We're talking about wrapping your strings over top of the tailpiece, which creates, you know, a totally different feel for your guitar. Lots of Les Paul users swear by it. So you can see the ball end goes in here. Normally you load it up from the back there. And here we're just going to go over top of the tailpiece like so. I'll try and keep my hands out of the way. But as you can see, there it's on the saddle. Obviously, if you use the tuning machine, it would suck right down there, but it creates a much shallower breakover angle and a totally different feel. You can see the strings in behind it have a very steep angle there, the tailpiece has been lowered, and then you'll just, reverse the order of your strings over top of that tailpiece to create a totally different feel. So there you go. That might bring some breathe some new life into your Les Paul, but I know a lot of guys love it and swear by it. And in lieu of that, if you don't want to do that, the way I normally set up my tailpiece, which kind of does the same thing, is just to have it quite a bit higher. And I know the newer Les Pauls seem to be, at least to me, coming with, instead of the tailpiece like this all the way down to the body, they seem to be coming a little bit higher like this. And I think that does lessen the breakover angle and relieves some of the tuning issues with the strings binding in the saddles there. So that would be my recommendation. Run your tailpiece a little bit higher so the breakover angle isn't so severe, just enough to give a good tone without any zinginess, or just do the tail wrap and suck it right down, and that, like I said, gives a totally different feel. So those are my recommendations for the back end of the guitar here. And finally, number 10, and I think the most important thing on this list, especially in regards to, living with a guitar you hate, it's just simply acknowledging and understanding what it is. This is a Les Paul, designed in the 1950s, largely unchanged to this day. Of course, it's going to have some limitations. Of course, it's going to have some quirks. It's not a modern design by any standpoint. It's not, a Ferrari, a Bugatti, a Tesla. This is an old school guitar design. And simply just acknowledging that, understanding that, so when you go to purchase one, whether new, used, trading, whatever, go in with your eyes wide open, understanding what this is and what this isn't. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel. You can hit the bell so you know when new videos go up. The rest of my information, the gear I use, all that stuff is down in the video description below. Hope you guys have a great week. I'm off to play my Les Paul. We'll see you guys later.